What do you think is the best sequel?
Probably Air Bud 4.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one. How about
Wide Retriever.
what's the best sequel that's the part 2 in the series? And I imagine our audience would probably say Build Your Own Video Roadmap Part 2.
Part 2.
Let's pick up where we left off. I believe in part 1 we stopped after the diagnosis phase, which is where we developed our halftime report.
That's right.
And the halftime report is not just a key exercise to organize everything, but it's fundamental to the development of the roadmap itself. The roadmap itself is then the collection of strategic concepts, timelines, budgets, platforms, distribution plans, things like that. Mm-hmm. But it all has to tie back to those things that you diagnosed in the beginning. Now, of course, the biggest part of the roadmap is going to be your series of strategic concepts. And I think it's important to differentiate between a strategic concept, like what is a strategic concept?
Yeah, Ben. So, what's the difference between? I'm going to be lobbing questions at you mostly because you've done a fair bit of these.
Okay.
I've got maybe some old school thoughts, and that might even be outdated. But
what might be fun for me is if you say something wrong and I correct you.
That would be fun for you. But that wouldn't be any different than any other day.
So, Justin, what questions do you have for me about strategic concepts?
Just a heads up, I haven't been involved in some of that for the past couple times we've done this. But I always found myself trying to make these things more of a creative thing than a strategic concept.
Which is a mistake.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what is the difference between a creative concept like a treatment or whatever and this, which is the strategic concept?
Yeah. So, a creative concept is what most people think of because it's
like you open on a valley.
Or even like it's an animated explainer video that walks through the top 3 features of our video. There's a character that leads us through,
meet Charles.
Meet so and so, or it's that level of detail. We open on, a cubicle farm with metaphorical worker bees heads down doing their work and or something like that. That is a creative concept. That is a big jump beyond where you want to be at this point. And potentially part 3 of this whole conversation is how to take strategic concepts and turn them into creative concepts. Because there's some magic there, but there are some fundamentals you can probably lean on. But what we're really focused on is I almost see it as a roadmap presentation is almost a debate. It's almost a logical presentation. Because this is one of the specific goals we identified. And this is one of the specific audiences we need to be speaking to. And this is what we want them to do. All those things, that's where the strategic concepts come from. So it's almost like you get to the slide, and we'll go through what's on one of these slides when we do them in a minute. But you get to the slide, you're presenting the basic strategic concept, right? It's a video about X speaking to Y, this audience, and getting them to do Z.
Action.
That take this action. It's essentially that fundamental. It's that basic. And then on the other side, we go through and lay out which goal we're addressing with this, which audience, where in the funnel they are. And so it's almost like this is the concept that we think is important, and this is why. And the whole this is why is just because of the things that you said. So it's almost like that match game where you're just matching up, coming up with your concepts is almost just matching up the goals, the audiences, everything from halftime. It's kind of looking at it and like, well, how many times can we, how many different audiences do we need to speak to about this particular thing? or get them to take this particular action. And so there could be multiple concepts, strategic concepts for one audience or for one goal. In fact, there probably should be.
Yeah.
Because if we go back to the manifesto, we should be coming up with very specific concepts at this point. So they're very specific opportunities. And so it's almost then, again, that roadmap presentation is almost a logical argument. This is the recommended strategic concept here because it satisfies this. There's no like, because I think it sounds cool.
Sure.
Right? Or like, wouldn't that be awesome?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've always seen the roadmap as just a set of constraints. So here are your constraints. Now go be creative. That's our part 3 kind of thing is building the creative into it. But these are the things that you have to fit creative inside of.
And just one more thing on the creative too is creative concepting takes a lot of energy. It is a very inefficient process. And what you're trying to do now is be as efficient as you can in coming up with the best opportunities for video. And so if you were to try to come up with 3 good creative concepts for each strategic concept, you're probably going to end up coming up with a third as many strategic concepts as you would otherwise. If you're given a set amount of time to put a roadmap together, it's almost like every creative concept you're tempted to come up with takes like one strategic concept away because you're just not going to, again, the efficiency thing. And so right now, it's much better to go ahead and see 30 strategic concepts, start to list them out and prioritize them, and then maybe at the end of it, 6 just aren't something we're going to worry about right now. Or 10 or 12 of these aren't what we're going to. But it's important both internally and externally, whether you're coming from an in-house perspective or you're a video agency or producer, you want to see what all of the opportunities are. And then that really comes in when we get to kind of prioritizing and bundling what we're going to do, what's done in-house, what's done with a production company, those kinds of things. We'll get to that.
So just from a set of categories, like categorically, what does a roadmap look like? If it was all laid out on this wall behind us, what would those pages look like?
So we like to start with an abridged version of the halftime report. So if the halftime report was kind of the organized collection of everything we've heard, what gets represented in the roadmap is the relevant stuff that we've heard. So sometimes someone that you're interviewing, one of your stakeholders has the goal to like make high quality video content. And that's something that you want to say, we heard you at halftime, but it's kind of a no-brainer and it's kind of a given when you get to the roadmap. So that doesn't necessarily need to be stated. Or, oftentimes because you're having these broader discussions in those stakeholder conversations, you get a lot of goals that you just can't address with video.
Right.
And so it's important to narrow the focus of the part that you heard to the stuff that we're going to be able to address, the stuff that we've identified we can address with video. So, and it's good because oftentimes, especially in our scenario, I hate it when it happens, but somebody new is coming into the process for the roadmap. They weren't involved in the stakeholder conversations, but just, now like it's their time. Because now they're going to hear like, what's the upside or what's the potential for video for us? What did I pay for? What's this is the deliverable of this engagement. So they often don't have that context of having gone through the halftime report. And so, and there's, at least the way that we do it, the roadmap and the halftime report are like part presentation, part report.
Yeah, we can't ever figure out the best.
No,
but you almost need it to be both.
You do, because you can't just hand it off to someone and think that they're going to get it. You've got to be able to provide just that kind of like description of things. That's why I hate when we are presenting and we just kind of get ourselves locked into, and it happens. You get yourself locked into just reading what's on the screen. Yeah. Right, but like, I mean, they can skim what's on the screen, and it's really your job to like say the stuff that didn't fit on the page.
What's in between the lines?
Yeah. And so it's important to have, these are the goals that we heard from you that we feel like we can address with these strategic concepts. So we've got that whole kind of recap of halftime. I like somewhere in there to put some kind of insights. I think a lot of the value that we bring and a lot of the value that people find in this process, even when they're doing it for themselves, is they come up with some aha moments or some questions to ask themselves about other content or whatever it is, right? So there's something where, they may not have expected a question. We're talking about it in a video sense, but then they realize I need to have a conversation with my blog writer about this because that could really spur some interesting blog concepts for us or whatever. And sometimes just being the outside perspective lets us see things that are maybe not as apparent to the client because they are
We're not
so
indoctrinated.
inside.
Yeah.
We haven't necessarily drunk the Kool-Aid yet.
Right.
But also, and I don't remember how much we talked about this in part 1, but there's an element to this where you may be talking to customers or clients of theirs. And so there may be some
New information.
or validating or challenging some of the assumptions that the client has about themselves. So like yesterday, we're actively engaged in a Springboard right now.
Several
with a new client. And yesterday we talked to one of their longtime clients. They've done like 24 deals with them since 2008. I mean, long-term relationship. And so without any of the prompting of what we'd heard from our client, we asked some key questions. When would you use this company for a thing? What are they like to work with? What do they do best? What could they do better? And what's interesting is most of what we heard from the client actually mirrored what we'd heard from our client.
That's awesome.
Right? Their client
when that
from
happens.
our client. So, but there were also some little things in there that she said, it'd be really nice if they had a local rep. They used to do local reps, and she was in Maryland. They used to have local reps. They got rid of them several years ago. And I know it's COVID and everything, but just not having a local presence, it's just not the same. We dug into that later on. And I can tell you right now, there's no way to fix that with video because they get video messages from clients. They do Zoom calls. They get asynchronous videos from other companies. And there's just no replacement in this scenario for being there in person. There's something tactile about that product also.
Yeah.
So that may not be something that we can address, but it's probably worth noting to the client that we heard it. And if that's something that we can pass along, that's just another data point for some executive to say, maybe we really should do this, then we've just brought that much more value. So insights are a good part of it. Just especially when there are things you assume that the company knows, but you maybe haven't heard from them, just put it out there. Sometimes it also gives them that oh, well, yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Just never thought of it.
That's a whole lot simpler than the way that I see it.
I also see this kind of recap of some halftime information as helpful when you do take that next step to the creative to be able to look at some of these things, even if that insight doesn't have anything to do with these strategic concepts. When you go start developing your creative, that could be an aha moment.
Yes.
So anything else in that? So part 1 of a roadmap is
halftime.
Relevant recap.
Yeah, relevant halftime, some insights, and then basically it goes into the meat in the middle of the sandwich of the road. That is the roadmap. That is strategic concepts.
Okay.
So we've kind of danced around it a little bit, but I imagine we can bring up a copy of one of these pages here somewhere. And so the strategic concept, the way that we lay it out is it starts with that purpose statement, right? And that is vaguely structured again as it's a video or a series of videos, because sometimes if it's like, there's a thought leadership opportunity, you want to just specify that it's a series of content. Sure. It's an ongoing or you're going to do 10 of these or whatever. So sometimes it helps to just say this is a standalone video or this is a video series that speaks to this thing, this product, this initiative, this whatever, this launch, specifically targeted to this persona, or sometimes these personas, that gets them to specifically targeted to these personas on these platforms, in these places, that gets them to take this action. Sometimes we write it out exactly like that. Sometimes it's a little bit, more
more
conversational. But it's 1 to 3 sentences that basically tells us what, it gives us the skeleton of the video that we need to make. But it gives it that purpose. Like, we know that if we make this video, we're going to be satisfying this need for content. Then on the right side, we're really breaking out specifically of the goals, right, from the kind of halftime recap that we feel like we can address. Which one or ones is this addressing? Is it shortening the sales cycle? Is it increasing MQLs? Is it whatever? Because your action is going to tell you which goal you are addressing, or vice versa. Because you want content that shortens the sales cycle, then maybe there's a particular action you want someone to, upgrade from your trial.
And that's the logical elements that you're talking about.
Yes.
And then, like you mentioned in the purpose statement, you mentioned platforms or distribution platforms or whatever it is. That's important because different platforms, like, they have certain constraints, and you can either take this type of action or not take this type of action.
Right.
And so having that in the purpose statement helps you understand how someone's going to take action through video.
Yeah. And sometimes, like, if you've got a client, let's say, that does a lot of PPC, and they're used to creating a lot of landing pages for their PPC campaigns, then you may know that a great place to put this particular video is on this product's landing page. And since you know it's going to be on a landing page, you may be able to say, well, it's an embed, but the form is actually going to be part of the standard landing page structure because their gated content is always teaser for piece of content, and then you got to fill out the form before you actually get to it.
Yeah.
Or that if they aren't doing a whole lot of PPC, they're not really doing landing pages, but they got a product page. This may go on the product page, but you may want to embed that call to action. Sign up for a demo, subscribe to the newsletter, whatever those kinds of things are. You may actually want to use the player that you're using to capture that information. So you're starting to lay those kinds of things out.
Yep.
And I mean, I could probably say, going back to the manifesto, for every single one of these pieces. But, we know that these concepts don't live in a vacuum. They're integrated with existing content, with existing websites, those kinds of things. If you know that it's going to be a LinkedIn campaign, for example, maybe you're actually suggesting that there are, some promotional elements that are driving people to the landing page that has the full-length video.
Yep.
So at this point, even if you don't have that creative concept, you know that you're going to leverage some of your LinkedIn ad spend on driving to this video because it's important on this landing page. So why don't we create some little promotional teasers, whatever, that we can put that LinkedIn ad money behind, and the call to action on LinkedIn is going to be to that landing page where you can see the full video. So what goal is it addressing? Which audience or audiences is it speaking to? And I think it's also the audience and the buyer's journey go so hand in hand. Where are we in the funnel? And when you get to the creative part, that's what starts to tell you how specific you need to be in this particular video. So if this is an awareness piece, then we just want somebody to know that
top 3 features.
Or even we know your pain points. This can help you.
Yep.
And then you may then be, and this is a huge part of the exercise of coming up with these concepts, is what are you then driving people to? If theoretically you're driving them closer to a buying decision, do you want to sometimes say, well, here's the awareness of our product video, but you want to actually drive them to then the consideration videos for that product. What does it actually do? What are the features? What are some of the benefits? I would reference, in fact, why, how, and what videos episode that we did as a great way to get multiple strategic concepts around one product or something like that. So where are they in their journey? And, there's also a lot to be said for larger production value, bigger production value at kind of higher funnel kind of stuff, and then you can get away with more
Right.
scrappy stuff lower down
Right.
in the funnel too. So that kind of leads to something that I like to call an attainability score that we're kind of working on at this point. But like, how many resources do we need to put into this? And if it's something that, you know, is right before somebody's ready to buy, but they just need to see how like a particular feature works on the back end, you don't need to hire a production company to come in and make something like that. You can have like one of your sales engineers do
Yeah.
a, you know, screen grab type video
Yep.
that sits in a library that anybody can use when a prospect needs to see that very specific thing. How is it going to be distributed? How's it going to be promoted? How are we defining success? What KPIs? And I think it's really important to focus on the actionable metrics. So if you're using a more advanced hosting system, for example, being able to track click-through rates, leads captured, real, deals closed, that it's a part, that attribution part, more so than like, we're going to get 1 million views on this video.
Yeah, go viral.
We're going to go, yes, metric of success, virality.
Yeah. 2 virals.
Yes. So because you really want to, and we've talked about goals a lot before, but you really want to be able to go back at the set time and say, did this do what we wanted it to do? Mm-hmm. Did we, we want to capture some leads from this video. That's fine. Mm-hmm. If you're early in the process of capturing, lead gen type stuff, getting people to, give up their email for access to a piece of content, that's fine, right? The fact that people are engaging with this enough to share their information with us. But maybe you know that you've been doing it a certain way where there's, it's a text-based web page. You're adding a video to it, and you actually want to see an increase in lead generation from that page because you've added video. So this is where you really want to, again, it's, I don't want to say it's a no-brainer, but it's a logical argument.
Yeah. Because
we're addressing this goal, your metrics of success should be tied to that goal. So if you're talking about, increasing MQLs, your metrics of success should be something MQL related, as opposed to something that has to do with shortening the sales cycle if that's not a goal that you're addressing. So you just want to be able to basically go back and say, after 6 months, a year, whatever, here's where we were, here's where we are now, this is what we wanted it to do, did it work? Yep. Or no, but close, or there's magic in that too, once you go from there. But you want to basically be able to establish what means success before you put it out there,
right,
rather than retroactively.
Timeline, budget, how it's being produced, duration. How often do you use those things when you're
honestly
building out a strategic
concept? It totally depends on the client.
Mm-hmm. Or I imagine even the concept itself sometimes.
Yeah, and it's hard because, but you've got to be clear what you're doing. So sometimes we'll put a timeline in there. We know that there's a budget of, I don't know, $250,000 for a year's worth of video content. Mm-hmm. It's going to come out of this roadmap or something like that. So you're not going to do any one-off projects, but we find ourselves laying out the timeline as if it was a standalone thing. So just to give an expectation of how quick a turnaround is this, right? So is this, it's loose, right? And it's not a contract. And so you're not mapping out the project, but it's like, this is a pretty straightforward series of client testimonial and case study videos. So it's going to be a couple weeks of pre-production to do some pre-interviews and get some travel, scheduled. Then we're going to, travel over 1 week and, shoot for a day or whatever. And then it's going to take us 2 weeks to edit it or something like that. Right. I mean, that's what, 5 weeks. So it's, call it 6 weeks. You have it in 2 months, something, but that's like, if it was a standalone thing, that you're going to be working on a lot of things. And so there's a lot of, economies of scale involved in this, but it does help to basically break down, like, I also always kind of look at the roadmap as like a Chinese food menu for the client. So we may be knee deep into like the phase 1 of production, right? The first 6 videos that we said were the top priorities. And we're deep in post-production on them, and we start talking to the client about what they want to do next. I always kind of picture them like opening their top drawer and pulling out this laminated printed roadmap. And they're going through
like a football coach calling plays.
Yes. And they're going through and you know, okay, well, you know, we're working on this one, we're working on this one, we're working on this one. So like where do I want to go next? Which ones do I want to do next? And so that's just a thing on there that kind of gives me like a good big picture, like, well, here's a quick hit. This is something we could get out in 6 weeks.
Oh, we found extra budget. Let's go do this one.
Yeah. And it's not a lot of extra budget, but you know what? We just want to add to our library because this video stuff is really working. We need to get more pieces out there, and they don't have to be high production, right? Well then, you know, let's pick some of these shorter timeline things. We'll scale them up. We'll do a bunch of them. We'll take a week to travel, and we'll travel to 3 different clients back to back instead of doing one at a time. Like it's just something that's kind of there in the bottom right corner to say, this is probably something that's simpler to do. This is something that's maybe more complex and is going to take.
Okay. You may also look at the attainability score.
That's true. And the attainability score is
a work in progress.
A work in progress. So the way that I have it in my head, the way that we tried to do it on the last roadmap that we did, and we're going to try to do it on the next one that we're presenting next week, is it's kind of a scale of 1 to 10, where a high attainability score means it's easy to do. It's highly attainable. So that may be something for the client. So it may be something that if it's something that with the resources we know that their team has, they can knock out in-house, that's going to have a 10 attainability score. That's something where the senior vice president of marketing can say to, you know, the one in-house video person team, hey, I need you to give me 6 things like this, or get started on this series or whatever. And it's happening like that. As your lower attainability score just involves more budget, longer timelines, probably an external producer, you know, those kinds of things. So they may be some of those grander, you know, like a Super Bowl commercial would have an attainability score of like 1. That is going to be a huge undertaking and very expensive. And
not if you're Doritos.
Right. But it's basically there based on, you know, our perception of our clients' manpower, budget, in-house capabilities, those kinds of things. Yeah. How quickly, so the higher the attainability score, the quicker it is, the easier it is to actually produce it. So that gets to, you know, because a lot of what we hear, to be perfectly honest, is, especially now more so than ever, is clients want to be really smart with what they're producing. They want to have that plan.
I've seen that change in the last 6 months to a year.
And we've been barking up the street for 2.5 years, and we're 2 years too early. But they want to be very deliberate and very thoughtful about what they're producing. But they also want it like now. And so part of it as a good agency partner is helping them balance results and content versus like what you really want to produce as an agency also. So how can we front load some of this stuff that has a higher attainability score? How can we get your new in-office studio set up so that your subject matter experts can start cranking out this thought leadership series while we start on pre-production for your brand anthem?
Yeah.
That's going to take 3 months to do because it's got to, but you've got this roadmap, and then it can just be really frustrating to be like, great, I don't get anything for 3 months. Like, that's so deflating. So, and I think that leads into to kind of the prioritization part of the whole roadmap. because you basically come back after you've presented all of the strategic concepts and say, based on what we know of your resources, time, budget, do you need to find low-hanging fruit? Do we have a bunch of video content that we just want to get on the right platform and start leveraging certain analytics and integrations with, right? We've worked with clients who have great video libraries, but they're only on YouTube. They're not embedded on their site, or if they're embedded on their site, they're YouTube embeds, and even if they're really good at like gating all of their other content, I have the hiccups. Even if they're good at really gating all of their other content, they're just putting this YouTube embed where they're not capturing any information.
Sure.
Like they are with all of their other content. Yeah. So sometimes it's about at kickoff, for now making this stuff and like enabling all of this content. Some of it may just be we take what you've got, we update it, and we get it out there on this new platform, or we run this promotional campaign to kind of recharge it to get stuff going. Because you need, from an analytics standpoint, you need 3, 6, 9 months for something to run before you can have any, really insightful analytics anyway.
Yeah, it depends on how being shared, but yes.
And so why not get some stuff out there up front that's easy to make or easy to repurpose or whatever? Start capturing that stuff while you're making the first batch of like less attainable, higher production quality.
Learn more about your audience as you're producing.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got relevant halftime recap. We've got anywhere from 1 to 30 strategic concepts, right?
Yeah, another thing that I'm just remembering, I like to bookend the concepts recently. I'd like to bookend the concepts with basically a visual representation of their customer's journey. So even if it's just as simple as like their funnel, awareness, consideration, decision, and then, maybe there's 1 or 2 post-sale kind of. So I do like to kind of put it up there in their words if they have defined their stages at the beginning, because of course, part of what's on each strategic concept is where in the funnel or customer journey this is. So I like just to kind of provide the context. Here's your journey. Let's go into these and these concepts, and then after the last strategic concept slide, go in and put the same image of their funnel, but then map out the names. Oh, that's one thing I left out. Map out the names of each of the content so you can kind of see how they're distributed. In one slide, are we really going, awareness heavy here? Is this really about like just closing the sale? If one of our primary goals is shortening the sales cycle, we're probably putting a lot of strategic concepts in the,
or
just
make those ones first.
Yes. Yeah. So it's just a good way to take like these 14 or 36 or whatever strategic concepts and just see where they fall overall. And most times you see kind of a pretty even distribution throughout the funnel.
Yeah,
but
depends on their goals.
But the name is important. The name is one of the things that I didn't mention.
It's
that's
like
on
a title
these slides.
of these
It's a
strategic
title,
concepts.
and it doesn't have to be that creative. But like one of the things that we almost always pitch as a strategic concept is testimonials and case studies. And with one of our clients, we realized that with one of our clients, we realized that you can actually get a customer testimonial and a case study out of one conversation with a customer, with your client's customer. And really just like one is very analytical. This was the problem, this is the solution, and these were the results. And then one is this helped me in my job.
Feel.
Do this, right? It's about how they feel.
Logic and emotion.
And so we basically stopped pitching testimonials as one strategic concept and case studies as one strategic concept. And we just made it one, and we call it the head and the heart. And so the case study is that head. It's the analytical thing that some buyers need. But then the heart is really that emotional, that softer experience that, this is how it helped me do my job better. This is how it made me feel. This is,
working with them was so much fun.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. So, when we have our, client testimonial, client case study stuff in there, it's called the head and the heart. And there's I learned this from one of my sales managers when I was in that world. And if you put a name on something, people just connect to it more. And so it doesn't even have to be
name my son.
Yes, you should.
Yeah.
It might help with a lot of your issues.
Yeah. Let me write that down.
One of your issues. It would help a lot with one of your issues. But so giving it some kind of name, even if it's like video podcast, it's a whole lot easier to wrap your head around. I mean, we could get into the semantics of what a name is, but it's an easy identifier instead of having to say like the purpose statement, right, every time. But it's a way to just start to just kind of understand,
Shorthand.
you know, okay, yeah, I need a homepage hero video. As opposed to a video that goes above the fold on the website that, you know. So naming is kind of important. You don't have to be super creative with it, but just name it something that's identifiable, because then you'll start referring to it. First Springboard we ever did, we threw in this crazy concept last minute about all of these different uses for like Victorian silverware. And we just referred to it as forks in the concept, but like forks was probably the most talked about concept, and part of it has to be the name forks. If we had, you know,
if we hammers home the absurdity of the Victorian era.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and you know, if we had named it like a treatise on Victorian utensils and their use cases, probably wouldn't have been as easy to sell as forks. Yeah. So we've done our halftime recap. We've done our insights. We've done this is our funnel. We've done our strategic concepts. This is where the strategic concepts fit in the funnel. And next we basically go to platforms and integrations.
Okay.
So I'll take the YouTube client, for example. We're going to be recommending an advanced hosting platform to them. Sometimes it's a green light to just pick the right solution for them. Sometimes we want to present a few options. So one we did recently, we know that they're using YouTube, but they're also using HubSpot a lot for sales and marketing. So we wanted to position a couple hosting options that had integrations with HubSpot. We actually gave them 3 options. One was like Vimeo Business that doesn't have a HubSpot integration, but they have like an OpenKit API kind of thing. And this client happens to be developers. So like they could write their own HubSpot connection because they have that capability. So that was like the cheapest option, but it was going to be better than YouTube. Then there was kind of this middle of the road like Wistia Advanced, which is one of those call for pricing kind of things, plus their HubSpot integration. And then like the third option was the Vidyard Teams Pro or Teams Plus, which is actually designed for HubSpot users. So it's not only a native HubSpot integration, but it's actually built on these are existing HubSpot users. So we were able to position those 3 options to the client, started going through some of the bullet points, and this client just said, you guys tell me what's right. And well, actually, I think the first thing he said was, okay, I have to do some more research. And then after about a week,
do any research.
he didn't. And he was like, all right, you guys just, here's money. You guys pick the right platform for us.
The platforms aren't just like, how are we going to show this stuff, but how is it going to be integrated with, like, how is our content going to integrate with our current content? How are we going to launch these promotional campaigns? How are we going to collect the metrics of success? All that stuff.
Yeah, how you know,
and creating attribution models based on that is a huge thing that people are looking forward to doing with video now.
Yep, and one of our clients, it's a marketing department, but part of their purview is sales enablement. So we want to be able to not just worry about like video hosting, how's it going to integrate with, but how is it going to integrate with that HubSpot or that new sales enablement platform that they're looking at? Or, you know, how does it fit with all of these pieces of the MarTech stack that are already in place there? What channels are we, what channels do we need to be aware of that we need to be posting this stuff to? Because that's something that you get to hand off to an editor also, so that they know that this is going to be distributed on, LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram and whatever, so that when they're actually creating like thumbnails, cut downs, whatever it is, that kind of stuff at the end of the post-production process, they also kind of know what they have to deliver, because all of those platforms
like what
have
export,
different,
what compression
settings, aspect ratios, time factors. Is it, an Instagram post, which can't be longer than a minute, or is this going on Twitter, which is 2 minutes and whatever it can be, or whatever. So laying out all of those platforms that are going to be used, all of the integrations that are going to exist, what attribution models we can set up with, all those kinds of things is, again, it's also one of those things that, like, if we pull the trigger on this, Mr. or Mrs. Client, you get access to all of this stuff. And if you don't, well, then you don't, and you're just stuck with where you are. I mean, part of it is kind of showing them, like, what the future could be. And that's before we even make any videos in a lot of cases, because they have existing content. So, yeah. So time to hear from our sponsor again.
Probably,
for this
we're
episode.
almost done with this thing.
Well, if you'll recall from part 1, our sponsor this week is Plant Magic. Have you gone off your regularly prescribed meds? Are you looking for something a little more organic? Do you like tripping balls? Then you should try Plant Magic's injectable shrooms. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3. Step 1, boil your Plant Magic's injectable shrooms into a tea.
Yep.
Step 2, draw your tea into a syringe and plunge into your favorite vein. Step 3, die probably. Plant Magic's injectable shrooms definitely don't do this.
My favorite vein is right here. I've got one on my forehead that every now and then comes out.
Trouble with that one is everyone
marks.
can see the track marks.
That's why I wear a hat all the time.
I see. Explains a lot. We have learned so much about you in the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, I don't even know these things until I say them out loud half the time.
That I knew about you.
So yeah, some of the other elements outside of strategic concepts, we just covered the platforms integrations and the value of that. I want to jump to this one here, video adjacent notes. So what I mean when I wrote that down, I remember you guys starting to not just say, here's the video we're going to make and it's going to go on this page, but almost like, here is where on the page it's going to go, and here's what text is going to be, eliminated because of the video or changed because of the video. And so I think helping kind of paint the picture of how this is going to live can be really helpful for clients to be like, I think we've seen their eyes like, what, widen up.
I think about, we've often, for a long time, we had just kind of a written note section where we would just kind of write that out. But in one of them recently, David actually went to, so one of the concepts we were pitching was, of course, a homepage video, because they don't have anything saying like who we are as a brand.
Yep.
Who are we as a company? Why do we do what we do? So they're missing this top level piece that's going to go above the fold on their website. But these people are also it's a very startup feel, entrepreneurial, like everybody's pitching in, but everybody's on the inside. And their website is a bit like, they're brilliant minds, but they don't really know how to talk about themselves when they're marketing themselves. And so when you look at their website, you look at their homepage, like their hero content and like their little kind of subtitle paragraph makes perfect sense if you know about them, but it's hard to understand at a quick glance what it is they actually do here. And so one of the great moves that David made was that he took a snapshot of their existing homepage, above the fold, and then he did 2 key things. He went into the inspect, right click in Chrome and inspect, so he gets access to some of the code, and you can actually go in and change certain things. So he went in and he changed the hero copy and that kind of, subtitle sentence literally to quotes that they had told us in the stakeholder conversations about whether it was key messaging or differentiators or whatever.
And embedded, didn't he?
And yeah, I mean he did the text,
Yep.
and then he took a thumbnail of a video and put that right under that hero copy so that you could see as their new homepage would load, you'd see this really clear copy that wasn't written by David. It was told to us by the clients in their own words, just in the context of a stakeholder conversation, instead of how are you going to write your website copy. So it was throwing their own words back at them, and then being able to see that video, they got to see immediately what their homepage was going to look like. And
it's so much more real and exciting when you
and that particular case led to them actually adding to our production contract that we're going to write the copy on the web pages that have video on it and work with their web developer to make sure that the video is in the right place, because there is all that kind of stuff. We've got one that we're in the middle of right now that I've referenced a couple times, where they're really good at gating. They're really good at creating content. They're really good at gating that content. They're really good at teasing that content as content that has value to a prospect. So they're giving the prospect a good reason to fill out the lead gate, but they're not doing it with video. And so part of our roadmap is that this is not just something that's, going to be put out on social channels, but it also lives on this page. And we're probably going to decide how much of it to gate. But that's what these advanced platforms also give us more flexibility with, is do we want to gate it up front? Do we want to ask for something at the end because we've already provided that value? But we get to say that this should be living on this product page, this kind of thing. So that's a good ad.
All right. I think there's one more really important thing that if you're creating this roadmap for one of your clients, there's an important part of this that we haven't gotten to yet, which is
money.
Yeah, kind of packaging. All right, so we've got these 37 concepts, right?
That doesn't feel very attainable to me.
No. And we know that their budget is $100,000.
Or do we?
We should.
But that's the thing, that I think that's what you're getting to, is like at some point we kind of have to know what we're working with.
Yeah, how are we going to do this?
Yeah.
Is somebody paying for this?
But there's an element to this, and we've learned a lot recently too, is like, when's the right time? Because you have to build up enough trust. I honestly don't think you should ask for budget. You should ask for budget once during the sales process. And if they're not just going to give it to you, don't push, because a lot of people don't like talking about money, and that's fine. But if you can get someone to commit to developing a roadmap for them
at a fixed price,
wait until after halftime. But you got to do it between halftime and when you present the roadmap.
Why?
Because you have to be able to say, this is what we're going to do first. And I mean,
you need the constraint.
I'm sure there are exceptions, but most of the time, and this is an important point too, don't just pitch the concepts that fit to the budget that the client tells you they have. Always present all of the opportunities, all of the reasonable, valuable opportunities for video, regardless of what they've told you your budget is. Because honestly, sometimes you may find out their budget like a day before you're due to present the roadmap.
Because I've been the one having those conversations with the clients after halftime.
Right.
And so,
which works because it sets you apart also as kind of like the account manager, business development person. You're not involved in the actual stakeholder conversations or the development of the halftime or whatever. There's something that works about that separation also. But yeah.
I have that information. I'm getting that information while you guys are making all the strategic concepts. Yes. So it's not impeding any of your process. It's not influencing your process. You're doing your job like you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And then when that number comes in, that's when we have the last couple of days to kind of figure out, all right, how are we going to package this?
How do we package this? Yeah. How do we prioritize this stuff? Great example. One of the examples we've been talking about already is we had come up with 14 or 16 strategic concepts that were pretty well developed pretty much in the roadmap document. And we asked, and you finally got a hold of the client to say, I got to tell the team what kind of, budget is available here so that they can make these, prioritization decisions. The client told you about 20 grand. It's like, well, there's stuff there, but like for right now, I'm willing to commit 20. So basically, like, we knew phase one was going to be 20 grand. It didn't prompt us to take a single strategic concept out of that thing. Because again, we treat it like a Chinese restaurant menu. Like, we'll get to this stuff eventually because it does have value. We don't need to do it all right now. So given that relatively modest budget, what's going to have the most impact? What's the lowest hanging fruit? How can we get the most bang for this buck? This is not, and to anybody on the, on the client side who's listening to this, who's skeptical of vendors, this is not like information so that we can figure out what to charge you. This is legitimately information to say, this is what we need to do first, because this is the best way to spend this budget that you have available. Now, we presented 3 options, because we like 3 options, on how to best spend that $25,000 with that client.
So we created 3 different packages, right?
It was 3 different packages. It was basically the same. It was the same, like 3 pieces we just kind of packaged. And one was like, well, we could do one of these, and one of these. And that's like our recommended approach because it's a little bit broader. Mm-hmm. We could do 3 of this thing, or we could do like 2 of this one. Mm-hmm. Kind of, and so it was like, we like the one of each approach. But if you really want to just jump into this thing that you're more familiar with, great. We'll just do 3 of these first. That fit within the budget. And then there was a little bit of like, but we really like this one. So let's give them one more. And, the way that, so it was a well thought out, phase one. It's like all this stuff is valid, but they were so engaged in the roadmap presentation. And so like, oh, I really like this idea, whatever, that first of all, the founder of the company dropped off before we got to prioritization, but he loved all the strategic concepts. The CEO who we were left with asked us to put together kind of a super package. He said, well, thanks for putting this package, these 3 options together, but when you send this deck over, also send me a quote for this, and this, if we did that first. And that ended up being like a $50,000 quote, basically. And then a week later, they came back and said, we're going to give you $100,000, and you guys are going to figure out
everything,
the best way to do this. You guys are going to be responsible for it all, and,
if you do a good job,
go be successful. And if you do a good job, we'll double it next year.
Yeah. Well, a very happy day.
Imagine, the lesson we took from that is, imagine if we had taken out all of the strategic concepts that didn't fit within that $20,000 initial budget. They wouldn't have seen any opportunity to, sign a $100,000 contract to do, this many things for them. The prioritization is, here's what we can act on and do now, but the rest of it is, but we're going to want phase 2 and phase 3 and we're going to want to be able to, and we've done it before where phase 1 was like, you have 80 grand. Here's what we're going to do with that first 80 grand. Here are the concepts we're going to put into phase 2. And before phase 3, we're going to take all of our analytics. We're going to pitch to the board for this much more budget for next year or the second half of the year or whatever. Yep. Like, depending on the relationship you have with the client, you can get to that stuff where you're actually providing them tools to, go ask for more budget or justify their spend or, all those kinds of things.
And that essentially, sometimes that's also a timeline. Like, here's the 3 we're going to make, and it's going to take us this long, and we're going to space it out this way. But generally, that's kind of where the document ends, right?
That is basically, yes, that is basically where the document ends. So here's what we can address with video. Here are the strategic concepts to address those things. Here's, based on the resources you've told us you have, how we should prioritize these and phase these things out, which, if you're on the agency side, you're essentially putting together a paid proposal.
Yeah.
But if you're on the client side, you're essentially getting a really clear map of what it's going to cost to do these things. That's pretty much it. And the next steps are, do we want to make any tweaks to phase one? Or do we just want to go ahead and start getting this platform in place and, repurposing some of your content and start pre-production on, these concepts or whatever? You got to kind of work together at that point to work out the plan. But now you're executing. So when we talk about the 7 phases and how everything above strategy is just executing that strategy, that's really what we're left with. We know what we're going to make, why we're making it, what it's supposed to do, where it's going, which platforms it's going to be on. We know all those things now.
I'm going to ask a tough question. How do you know how to budget if you don't know what the creative is?
It's a great question. 2 years ago, I would have told you that, well, you know what? You're right. You don't. But to be perfectly honest, anybody in the client situation here has multiple production vendors they could use. Any video agency or production company worth their salt, or wanting to be a true partner with the client in this case, is going to have variable levels of production value that they can hit.
Sure.
And so I could get into a longer conversation about value-based pricing here, I feel like, but it just goes back to the constraints. If you know that this budget is available to you from the client, and you're going to say, part of what you're doing is you're making a commitment that we're going to make these videos that are going to do these things for you, and you're willing to pay us this much to do that. That, in its essence, is value-based pricing, right? That is, if we can hit these metrics of success, then we feel like the value for that concept is X, which means that's 25% of the budget that you have available to you. So we're essentially pricing and packaging everything based on value or perceived value to the client, which is why it's so important to put that lowest hanging fruit, that stuff. It's so important up front to show the impact and get the impact for the client than it is to do the video that you really want to do in this group of things as an agency. So essentially what you've done is you've value priced these things, and then that is your creative constraint to go execute. Now, if you're putting a package of videos as a production in phase one, well, then you get to work your magic as a production company and move the budget around to certain projects to make them right. So if you got $100,000 to do phase one of these videos, well, you know that one of them is, going to be, a big awareness campaign kind of push. And it's going to be
Above the Fold homepage.
Above the Fold homepage, it's probably YouTube pre-roll. It's going to look good. It's going to get some attention. It's going to have some viral element to it. It's going to get noticed.
Or it needs to.
It needs to.
Based on his,
Well, then, you're probably going to shift more of your budget to that thing than the head and heart testimonial and case study stuff that you also recommended was in phase one, which can be lower budget. So, it's your job as a video agency to become a production company at that point and say, where's the right distribution of now this money we've gotten from our client?
I want to point out something that we've just started doing past couple.
Is it red team?
Yeah.
Then wait.
Okay.
So we've talked a lot about what is in a roadmap. We haven't talked yet and what a strategic concept is, but we haven't yet talked about how to come up with them. Really, the process of coming up with them.
Okay.
I think we've talked about enough about the elements, but But just like you're talking to multiple stakeholders, and just like there should be multiple people conducting the stakeholder conversations from the client side, just like in halftime when you get together and you go over all of your notes and start to see where the threads are, group goals together, all those kinds of things from all these disparate conversations, you also have to then come together as a group to start to identify at the basis level what these concepts are. And so from a functional standpoint, the way that we find works best with that is post halftime, because you don't, through the stakeholder conversations, through the halftime report, you're going to hear like client requests for videos, or you're going to have ideas that you're going to write in the margins, whatever. If you're super organized, sometimes I like to like use a particular color highlighter to highlight those things, like when we're going over the notes to put together halftime. Just as a reminder that anything in green highlighter is like a potential strategic concept. So the best ideas, the lowest hanging fruit, the easiest ones to sell to your client are going to be the ones that came up in those conversations. So if you once you've gotten your kind of sign off on the halftime report, or presented the halftime report and heard some, a couple new notes, like one of our clients in halftime said, I think this is all of them except one that I totally forgot to mention when we were talking, which is like super high priority. We have this piece of content that I want to turn into a video.
Why you do halftime?
Great. This is fantastic. So like that's highlighted in green. So we've got sign off on halftime. We're starting the process, and we just start with, all right, let's everybody go through your notes and let's throw into one document all of the like most basic, what's floating on top ideas for concepts. And I would say that 2/3 of the concepts we come up with come from that discussion. And sometimes 4 of them are basically the same thing. But after you get this kind of initial brain dump down, then you start really grouping out your notes. You're like, well, I think that's kind of the same thing. Or you see 2 things that are similar, like, oh, well, that would be better if it was a blank. Or maybe, okay, well, this thing, and this thing, this product, this brand why, these product hows, and these product whats, they probably go together in a group. So for each of their products, we need, right now we're calling it the product pyramid. Basically, we're like, here's what this product is. Here are a couple videos about what it does. And here are a couple more videos about how it really works, like how you use it. So most of that stuff actually comes out because you've either noted it, or you just know that based on conversation, like this stuff is really important. You group those things together, and then when you start to kind of rank them in terms of priority, before you even have that budget, you really start to get a sense for where the holes are. And that's where you go back through. So right now, we've actually got all of our initial brain dump concepts into individual slides in the document. And as we started going over it yesterday, it was like, all of these are completely relevant and valid, but I feel like we're missing a few things. And that's where we left the conversation. I don't know where they are, but there are a couple holes that I think, just through experience and having done this for so long, there are a couple things that are missing. And if we just think about it for a few minutes, we'll realize where those holes are. And then we just go back and fill in those holes. So, I mean, it's a collaborative effort to essentially get like something between the title and the purpose statement. But it's like, well, they need a brand why. They need a homepage video. They need a product video that lives on each of their product pages. That's a high level view of their product. Those things just come out like that. And that actually is, I'm not going to say it's easy, but like that's where most of the concepts come from, is just that we've been talking about this nonstop for 2 weeks. Now I'm going to like open the floodgates, and all these things that are just kind of simmering there come pouring out. So, it's kind of like there's some magic, but it's not magic. It's just, if you're listening,
logical
they'll present themselves.
Yeah.
And then you go back in and you really start to attach each of those things to, the goal that it's addressing, the audience, those kinds of things. And that's how one concept could become 3 or 4, because you may want to take a different approach with this audience, or you may want to take a different approach with something that does something similar, but it's a different stage in the funnel.
Especially if you want to do some testing as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. After we've put the roadmap together, then we bring you in.
That's right. So this is something we've been doing as of maybe the past 3 or 4 of these. And especially because I haven't been involved in a lot of those stakeholder conversations and halftime reports and whatnot. So we call it red team. I think that some people probably know what that means, but basically they pull me in and they present to me as if I'm the client, and I get to poke holes, ask questions, and it serves a number of purposes. I feel like one is it gives you guys practice at presenting it, which is always helpful.
It's really annoying, but it's really valuable.
Yeah. So yeah, you get to practice it. And then usually just on your own, you'll figure out, oh, this needs to go and kind of reformat.
And sometimes we go into it like we'll leave some asterisks on things knowing that it's a discussion point. Like, I don't know, Justin, there's a whole thing we could get in here about this or that, whatever. Does it feel worth it, or do we just not need to?
5 to 10 minutes about it and figure out.
Yeah.
And then, asking questions, where do I, because I haven't been a part of it, why is this like this? Or why did you say that here? How is that relevant? It just helps tighten up the presentation.
I think it's key that you are. So there's 2 elements that we've been doing to a red team. So our project manager has been in the primary stakeholder conversations, not in the secondary stakeholder conversations. She's part of the review of stakeholder conversations because she's there as a third set of ears to hear something differently than David and I might. So we get her notes and her perspective, and then she's not a part of the process anymore. So she's got fresh ears because she hasn't heard anything since the last, primary stakeholder conversation. You haven't heard anything about this other than maybe some anecdotal things or things that help us queue up a Vidyard introduction, or, they've got a product launch in 6 weeks and we're not going to be done with the roadmap. So we need to figure out how to do a, product video before we present the roadmap for them, kind of thing. So having both of you on the red team, one, I kind of take it from the perspective of like, I'm not trying to impress you or make the best presentation as if you're the client. The first time we did it, that's what I did. I tried to pretend you were the client, and that didn't work. As well as when you're just you, and we're just trying to walk through it, and I'm just trying to bring you up to speed on what we've learned about the client. Because you've talked to them through the sales process.
Right.
But once they became a client and started having these paid conversations with us, sometimes you hear things differently. So we don't necessarily want you to still have the assumptions that you had 3 months ago in the sales process. So and then Jacqueline is there to kind of catch things that we missed or things that she thought might be there because, right? So because she has a little bit of perspective, she's like, well, what about this so-and-so? I thought that was something that was, and we're like, oh shit, we totally forgot that. Whereas you got that completely blank slate. You're learning about the client now on a level that you haven't known them. And if you can understand it,
then they should know.
Then they should.
Yeah. And so we'll do that at halftime and at the roadmap.
Yeah. It is an exhausting process, but it is so valuable. I feel like I'm going to go into a sales pitch now. But I mean, it is, the clients that we end up working with on a production basis where we go through this process, the productions go so much smoother.
Yes. Oh God.
Than when we don't do this. Because
the creative is better.
For so many, the creative is better. The relationship is better. That is so much of this. Is it's not just a trust thing, but before jumping into making videos, you have 4, 6, or 8 weeks to start to understand the client as a person. Like how good are they with feedback? Do they show up for meetings on time? You know, do
they get you materials quickly?
Yeah. How well thought out are their brand guides? Like, all these like signals that help you understand how to be a good partner to them, and then when you kick off production, you're just 1 or 2 months ahead of the curve in terms of how to work together and what their priorities are.
Understanding the products.
And understanding the products
Clients.
and the space and the audiences. And it's just so much easier to be creative and actually make the stuff when you've dedicated yourself to understanding it beforehand.
Yeah, I know that the level of confidence we have moving into production is so much higher when we've gone through this process.
Yeah. Yeah. Your relationship with the client at this point is that this is not a pitch meeting. I mean, if you want to look at it from an agency perspective as like we're getting paid to pitch, fine. And to be perfectly honest, that's where we came.
That's
From
how we
a
got
lot
here.
of this. I mean, it's okay. We've got great ideas. How do we get compensated for these things instead of like wasting our time giving up these ideas and then not getting the project? But you really can't treat it as a pitch meeting. It is, these are our recommendations based on everything you've told us.
As a professional, as an expert.
Yeah, I mean this, and you know, and someone made the point recently in an internal call that you don't have to say that part, right? Like you just are that. Like it's clear from the depth of the questioning and the insights and the concepts that you've uncovered and created out of these conversations that you're experts, right? So there's got to be a confidence and a look, like, here's what you got to do. We just got to figure out how to do it, when to do it. I mean, that's really what this is. So these roadmap presentations are very interactive. They're very conversational. And it's kind of like at every strategic concept, we'll kind of do the initial pass on it. Here's what this is. Here's what it, you know, the subtext for what's on the slide. And then there's a back and forth about it, right? They get to ask, you know, they say, okay, so this is kind of like a whatever. It's like, well, it's different than that because, or yes, exactly. It's just like that thing that you sent us or whatever, you know. So you just have this back and forth conversation. But then oftentimes the client comes up with really good little tweaks on
for
it.
Sure.
And so, of course, you're actively listening and you know, taking notes and that kind of thing. But always record. I mean, now that they're not live, now that they're all video chats anyway, record it. Send a copy of the recording and the deck to the client afterward. And, you know, and imagine and think about how excited they are at that point. Because if they've paid you to come up with a plan, they have plans to execute that plan.
Yeah.
Right? Even if they've told you, well, we don't know what we want to make yet, so we want to bring you guys in to help it. Like, they want the plan so they can figure out what to make. And what you've done is you've basically put a really well thought out plan in front of them. And worst case scenario, they don't take your recommendations, but they like pick and choose their own things. Okay. Well, that means they're really excited about them. They see value in them. And so they're going to want to do them. So, you know, from a sales standpoint, I think what I'm trying to say is like, use that level of excitement to your advantage and go ahead and try to lock down what phase one is as quick as possible. And if it's not one of the, you know, priority packages that you recommended, have the conversation with them and figure out what really resonated with them. Where do they see the value? You can push back.
Yeah.
Right?
That's why they're paying you.
Right? But that's what a partnership is. And we've had a little bit of that before is like, look, this is going to have the best impact for you quicker. And they say, yeah, I get that, but I really want the so-and-so. Mm-hmm. Okay, but it's going to take longer. It's not, that is an awareness piece, and it's, you know, it's not going to help shorten our sales cycle, which is what you guys' biggest problem is, and the thing we want to address most. And then if they say, yeah, I know, but I really want it, great. Then you do that. But like, everybody's level of excitement, I think, is at its peak after a good roadmap presentation, because this is now on the client side, we have this solved for us, right? This is what our options are. We now get to do this better than what we've been doing, or finally doing, or whatever it is. And I think that, it's a great momentum piece to then just kick off into pre-production on stuff, is just take that level of excitement and the possibilities of what can come out of all this, because you're probably never going to reach that level again of like optimism about the possibilities.
Yeah.
Than when you've just laid out a really well thought out plan.
I think there could be a part 3 and 4 to this thing. I think there's, where are the challenges? How do you overcome them throughout this process? I'm just imagine and even bringing in David or something on that. But you two opining on the last several months of, which seems like a whirlwind of all the strategy that we've been building for our clients. And then the next step, which is building the creative.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a future episode. We'll call it turning strategic concepts into creative concepts. I think that's probably an entire episode's worth. I don't know how to write an outline for it, but I imagine if we just started talking. But yeah, there's road mapping. There's the 200 level road mapping class, which is, how many stakeholders do you do? Do you talk to clients or customers of your clients?
Sure.
Do you survey the sales team? Do you, how many people is too many people? How do you get them all scheduled? How long should this take? There's a very tactical 200 level course here somewhere.
Well, let's wrap this one up. We'll get to the sponsor and leave our viewers, listeners
wanting more. After 2.5 hours of discussion about how to... It's easy. Build your own roadmap. Listen for 2.5 hours and we'll tell you how. Welcome to our sponsor, Plant Magic. Have you gone off your regularly prescribed meds? Are you looking for something a little more organic? Do you like tripping balls? Then you should try Plant Magic's injectable shrooms. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3. Step 1. Boil your Plant Magic's injectable shrooms into a tea. Step 2. Draw your tea into a syringe and plunge it into your favorite vein. Step 3. Die probably. Plant Magic's injectable shrooms. Definitely don't do this.
Yeah, again, that's based on a real story.
A true story.
Have we heard about that guy?
I haven't.
People inject the weirdest stuff into them. Like some guy who did highlighter, or like glow stick fluid. He was at a rave, I think, and wanted to look amazing.
Wanted to glow. There's this guy once who, 3 months into the COVID-19 pandemic, suggested putting bleach into your body because bleach killed the... Yeah. Did anybody hear about that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where'd that guy go? I don't have an update. Everything is mid-June.
Well, he's probably
probably fine then.
Oh, okay.
I think if he had died, we probably would have heard.
Well, thank goodness.
Well, yeah, definitely don't inject shrooms into your... if you missed the first episode of this, the dude injected boiled shrooms into his self, and the fungus started going throughout his veins inside his body.
Fungus is fungi crazy.
And,
pretty amazing.
So
I wonder if he's going to get, like, superpowers, though. Holt thinks so.
Yeah.
Again, don't do it.
Yeah, don't do it. What kind of superpowers, though? Like... Is he going to become like a really good sous chef and he'll just be able to like grow a nice like mushroom out of his... He's got a portobello growing out of his elbow.
I don't know. I would think...
Portobello?
Maybe like dimension traveling or something.
Okay. It turns out he has the superpower of returning from the dead because he was basically dead, but now he's not. 22 days in the hospital, 8 of which were spent in the ICU. All right. Well, I think that wraps up our 2-part journey through creating your own video roadmaps. If you're skipping ahead to the end, I would just say hire us. Otherwise, you could commit yourself to 2.5 hours of
We'll put a
episodes.
buy now button here.
Yeah. Do all of the things prescribed in these 2 episodes or hire us. I think too much of our content is soft sell stuff. We really need to drive some revenue with our content. Thank you so much for watching, listening. Give us the old like, subscribe, whatever. iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you find your podcasts. I don't know, whatever the ending is.
I just go to the next podcast when I start to hear this kind of stuff.